How do you feel when you watch that clip?
It's a reminder that so many of the issues that we face in South Africa are actually universal issues. Of course, one of the ways in which you mitigate against that kind of injustice in the US is that it's a regulated industry, so that you would be able to take this to your union structure. SAG-AFTRA, as we know, is the world's biggest actors union. And through that union, they can address things like pay disparities. In South Africa, though, being an unregulated creative sector, there is no place to go. So if you are trying to address issues of injustice, sexual harassment, pay disparities, the precarious nature of our work, the lack of social security and other benefits, you literally are left to your own devices.
It's actually quite emotional watching her break down like that. But as we know, she's not the first. You and your colleagues back here at home have been vocal about this issue. And as you mentioned now, the fact that it's not even regulated in this country puts you even 10 steps further behind your US counterparts. Earlier on in this year, we saw the production strike as well in the US.
Yeah.
Did that not change things globally?
There was more of a focus on the important points that were being made. So if you cast your mind back to what led to the strike in the first place in the US, it was issues about the misuse of artificial intelligence, as well as the lack of residual payments through the streaming platforms that were producing so much work. In South Africa, we are faced with very much the same kind of threat. So while there was global attention being paid to the issue, while obviously the world's biggest actors union is paying attention to it, everyone is paying attention to it. But we find that because resolutions were found in the US as a regulated industry, we didn't necessarily find a trickle-down resolution to the South African issues, because, again, we are not a regulated industry in the way that they are in the US. Doesn't make it any less important to us, but it means that when a negotiated settlement could be found in the US, there isn't a similar mechanism in South Africa in order for those resolutions to find their place in South Africa.
How far are we from this regulation? How far are we from these steps forward to try and amend this? I mean, you've been in Parliament several times already. You've tried to raise this. We've seen bills that are proposed. But how far are we from a tangible difference where actors and people who work in the entertainment industry can feel some sort of a protection?
I think it's important to state that, yes, I have been carrying a mandate from SAGA members when we are in Parliament, when we are engaging with the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, the Department of Employment and Labour. And whenever we engage with them, it becomes more and more clear to us that there doesn't seem to be any political will to pursue the regulation of the creative sector. So, yes, we do have occasional sporadic engagements, and there is a view that obviously if we can start to regulate our sector, we are then working towards the ideological resolution of certain political agendas. So when we talk about addressing injustice and protecting the most vulnerable and trying to help those people who absolutely need the help, then yes, we start talking a political language. And that's when particularly government wants to engage. It takes somebody with a high profile to die in poverty.
Yeah.
It takes somebody with a high media profile to write a letter to the minister and send it, and for that to become big media news. Only then do we see that there's any kind of interest in looking at the sector again. But apart from that, what we are missing is the political will to address the injustices and the inherent inequalities that are built into the sector.
It's Christmas Eve today. It's the festive season, and for a lot of freelancers, it's actually not a good period. You know, there's a lot of things to think about. There's rent, there's school fees to pay, you know, every other bill that you have to pay, and then you still have this pay disparity, and it's not just actors, it's across the board. When we look at artists, yesterday was Zahara's funeral, and it was also mentioned there as well that where is the money that is owed to her?
Absolutely. These are the questions we are all asking. And those questions are answered in the Copyright Amendment Bill and the Performance Protection Amendment Bill. And what's disconcerting to us, and in fact we feel deeply disappointed by this, is that for 6 years, SAGA has been carrying the voices of actors into Parliament. And whenever Parliament said, we need stakeholder engagement, we'd like for you to make a submission, Saga was there. And we're all volunteers. This is something that we're not paid to do. Every day that I'm not acting, I'm missing out on a paycheck. So this was my commitment to the cause. My commitment to the transformation of our sector is to say, I will be attending and I will be making a submission. Some are oral submissions and some are written submissions. And some are about the Copyright Amendment Bill as it makes its way through Parliament, which it has been doing for 6 years. And by the end of it, now we have reached a point where the bill's being signed off by the National Council of Provinces in September this year. They are now back to the Portfolio Committee of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And it's off the agenda. And we cannot understand why the Portfolio Committee has not simply exercised the due process that it must take in order to resolve the transition of the bills through all the various stages that it has passed through.
What was the point of all of that?
That's the question, isn't it? We are asking, what on earth did you ask us to engage with over the last 6 years, where we can't now see this over the final hurdle? This is the terrifying thought for us, because as actors we need that residual income. That is now written into the bills, which means it's the possibility of becoming law. So we can rely on South African law to say we'll be able to earn a bit of money from the work we have already done, so that it can sustain us through the times that we are not working, and attend to, as you say, the festive season shopping and the school fees and the school shoes, and just the living expenses, which is rising, month on month in South Africa.
How frustrating is it for you as actors? The irony of this whole thing is that you've been going there with no pay, missing out on pay to make sure that you have a good pay.
Yeah.
It's almost such a double standard, and then you get to the end of the road and then, well, it seems like it was all for nothing.
This is the slap in the face, because every single one of those parliamentarians, members of parliament, people sitting in those committees, they are all earning salaries paid for by taxpayers. They are all earning their subsidies and their perks and their free transport and their multiple homes. And they have all of that courtesy of the South African taxpayer. And all we are asking for as actors is do your job. Make sure that the bills are signed, that they are back on the agenda. And of course, the prospect for us is that how much time does this Parliament have left before we go into the State of the Nation address, before we go into the national election? You've got 3 months for this to be resolved. And I suppose many people, including myself, have a very pessimistic view of whether there persists a political will amongst our parliamentarians to see this bill through to the end in order to achieve the objectives that it started off with.
What's the risk, Jack? What if this doesn't happen? What if we continue on this path? What does it mean for our entertainment industry? What does it mean for the likes of yourselves and your colleagues?
It means that we will be back sitting around this table talking about the death of a famous, iconic veteran performer. It means we'll be discussing again how somebody was cheated out of their royalties, about how the unregulated side of the royalty collections have failed performers and musicians. We'll be talking about another great performer who's come and gone. And had they earned a residual income from the body of their work over decades, that they've been a popular figure, that their lives might have been saved in some way. Until we see the political will, until we see Parliament stepping up to do its job, and until we see the resolution of the bills, which should be signed, then I'm afraid we're gonna just go and repeat. You might as well just record this show and repeat it in a year's time.
Because unfortunately what it means for us, the consumers and the audience who enjoys the work and the talent that is given to us, that means that it will no longer be there.
And it's a reminder that South Africa is failing yet again to step up to how industries should be regulated. Bearing in mind that within Africa itself, you have Nigeria, Kenya, Morocco that are all regulated creative sectors. Around the world, you have creative sectors that are unionized. And you are able to take major discussion points like the interview that you just played earlier and put that on the agenda for them to be discussed and resolved. And until we have a regulation, or until we have some structure for fair regulation, we'll still be dealing with the injustices of the apartheid era that has entrenched itself in the creative sector, and nobody, not one single government department, nobody in Parliament even, seems to consider to be important enough to address.
Lastly, you say we probably have 3 months to fix this.
Yes.
Is it doable? Is it possible?
I believe it's doable, it's possible. I think what we will see is a very clear indication of the intention of our lawmakers and their political will to address the injustice in our sector, to address the objectives of the bills, and to see whether they are serious about transformation.
Thank you so much for your time, Jack. Thank you for joining us, and good luck to you and all your colleagues.